This is my review of the Air Max 2017 after 2 months of use. Throughout the video, we'll talk about its features, why this Air Max was released as a running shoe but is now categorized as a lifestyle shoe, if it's good for training, and why I would only wear these casually. The Air Max 2017 released at the end of 2016, but the only reason we're making a video on it now is because I got it back in November during a Black Friday deal, or the version of a Black Friday deal back in Mexico. The shoe retails for $190 US, which is just a little higher than the shoes that we tend to cover here on the channel, but that actually brings me to my first point about them, and that is that they're quite expensive for a shoe that's been out for more than 6 years. It's a decent shoe, to wear casually at least, but the way I see it is, if you can easily spend that much money, then you can most likely spend an extra, let's say 10 to 20 US and get a Vapor Max shoe, which will be a more modern take on the same concept from this one. On the other hand though, you still have plenty of Air Max options out there. For example, the Air Max 270, which could save you anywhere between 30 to 50 US that I personally think would provide an overall better experience and still give you a more modern look. But if you still want to buy a pair of these, I got them on US size 11, which is true size for me, and I'm happy to tell you that they fit just fine, so you can get them on your usual size. Starting at the upper, it's quite rigid, and it's a combination of a synthetic mesh and Nike's own Fly mesh. This combination runs throughout the upper in addition to a bit of cushioning, or molded foam as Nike calls it, to create a very unique pattern that takes up most of the midfoot and heel areas of the shoe. The molded foam starts at the midfoot because Nike intended to use the design in order to add more security to this area of the shoe, but it is a bit too close to feeling narrow. The upper is also not the most flexible. The shoe feels quite robust and heavy, and they feel like they're very uniform and a bit too structured. The cushioning, or foam, extends to other areas of the upper like the tongue and collar, but it also feels like they overdid it. The cushioning at the collar specifically can become uncomfortable from time to time. It feels secure for the most part as it locks your ankle down with a decent adjusted feeling, but it's a more rigid type of cushioning, and it sometimes feels like it digs into your ankle and creates some discomfort. The toe box isn't the widest, but it's also not as narrow. It allows a decent amount of room for my forefoot, and it hasn't become uncomfortable, but the upper on this area is still not as flexible, which became a bit of an issue for performance. Moving on to the midsole, it's actually not only the Air Max bubble serving as the midsole, there's also sculpted cushion, as Nike refers to it, in between the upper and the bubble, which is meant to help with impact reduction and adds a bit of extra cushioning to the shoe. But as usual, I have to be honest with you, and the reality of it is that the cushion doesn't really do a lot. The full length bubble still overtakes the overall cushioning experience when the shoe hits the ground, and the cushion helps a little, perhaps with providing a softer underfoot feeling, but it doesn't seem to be as significant as Nike wanted it to be. The bubble is still very aesthetically pleasing though. The see-through view and the way that it combines with the rest of the shoe make it stand out and give the shoe a very unique look. Outside of that, it feels like a standard Air Max bubble. It adds about 1 to 2 inches or 5 to 6 centimeters of height, and it does a great job at making you feel like you're walking on air. Just like I mentioned for the upper, however, the bubble also adds to the overall bulky feeling throughout the shoe, as it feels like it's a bit larger and like it takes up a lot more surface area than it needed to. Moving on to the outsole, it is entirely covered with this thick high abrasion rubber that simply adds unnecessary weight and noise to the shoe. On top of that, the rubber covers most of the entire bottom of the shoe with a very restrictive pattern, and there's little to no flexibility because of it. The shoe feels a bit restrictive and flat when you're walking, but the real issue happens if you want to use it for performance, because then you're gonna have a hard time like I did. When I first got the shoes, I noticed that the insole had Nike running branding on it, which made me a bit confused because when I got them, they were under lifestyle shoes and not categorized as running shoes. And Air Max shoes have a history of being used or even categorized as running shoes, so that wasn't as much of a surprise. So that forced me to make an assumption about the shoes, and I think it's a rather simple one. The shoes are not good for running. And obviously I wasn't going to let you guys find out for yourselves, so I took it upon myself to test them for running, and my assumption was right. Everything that I've mentioned up until this point about the shoes' features played a factor into having a very uncomfortable and forgettable running experience with them. The upper, bubble, and outsole are very firm and restrictive, and the entire shoe felt limited and not flexible at all, especially while flexing my feet when transitioning through a stride. My feet felt like they were restrained within the shoe, and I had to run in a very specific way in order not to feel like I was going to hurt myself. The bubble, while meant to provide cushioning, didn't really do much either. When my foot hit the ground, it didn't feel soft or even bouncy, and it rather felt like a very standard, non-responsive foam. The extra height and design on the bubble still created the Air Max experience of walking, or in this case running, on air, but it felt like it was throwing off my form as it didn't feel as natural. The outsole though was, without a doubt, the thing that bothered me the most. It felt as if most of the restrictive feeling came from here, and the bottom of my foot felt incredibly limited as to what it could do. The pattern used on this outsole simply doesn't feel that good for running or any type of performance really, so if you're considering buying these for running, I recommend you don't. Going back to the beginning of the review, there are other amazing shoes out there that are going to be way better for running for a cheaper price. They're most likely not Air Max shoes, but they're going to provide an overall better experience than these. I also tried them for training, more specifically HIIT workouts, so you wouldn't have to, and the results are exactly the same. Simply too restrictive throughout, felt like my form wasn't natural on most exercises, and it truly feels like a lifestyle shoe that should not be used for performance. Maybe, and that's a very hesitant maybe, as a gym shoe, but I also think that you can find other great options for less money. The shoe works a lot better casually though. A lot of my complaints aren't as noticeable or as inconvenient while wearing it this way. Comfort wise, the muscular and bulky feeling are still there, primarily because of the foam throughout the upper. Also, the shoe still feels quite heavy compared to other shoes, and it makes your feet feel as such. I still wear them around the house though, and once they break in, they become more forgiving on the bulky aspect of them, but it's still noticeable. I've also been wearing them while out and about, and they're not terrible, but you can still feel the restrictiveness while walking, so it's something to keep in mind. Now, I don't think you should spend $190 on this shoe, especially because it's a model that isn't necessarily new, except if that's what you want. If you want to buy the shoe because of nostalgia or owning a 2016 shoe in 2022, kind of like I did, then you could go for it. I think it's a decent option to have as an everyday running errands for a bit, walking around the house shoe, but nothing else. However, if I only had $200 to spend, I think I would look at other options. I would probably go for an Air Max 270 or the Air Max 2021 if I wanted an Air Max shoe and I wanted to save some money. But if you're looking for something for performance, then any of the shoes that we've taken a look at over the past few months would be great options as well. And that was it for today. Thank you for watching. Pablo, out.